Welcome to Brave Awareness. I'm Ronn Pawo McLane, meditation teacher, author, and poet, and someone who's done their fair share of surviving. This podcast isn't here to teach you how to fix yourself. It's here to remind you that you're not broken. These are spoken transmissions for modern minds, reflections, disruptions, and sacred interruptions. Let's begin. I want to tell you about a moment that tested everything I teach. My husband has been navigating something genuinely difficult in his family for a while now. An ongoing situation with his father that has no clean resolution, no clear end point. The kind of thing that sits in the background of life and surfaces in waves, requiring a little more each time it does. He came to me with an update, opened the door, shared what was happening, and I did what I do when someone I love is in pain and I can see a path that they haven't seen yet. I offered support. I offered a perspective. I offered what I genuinely believed was a way through something he had been treating as a wall, and the door slammed. Not quietly, not gently. He pushed back hard. He made it personal. Accused me of things that were not only untrue, but were the precise opposite of what I'd been doing. Told me I'd checked out when it came to the situation with his father. I want to sit with that for a moment, because if you've ever tried to help someone you love and had that help received as an attack, if you've ever been accused of the exact thing you were actively trying not to do, you know the particular quality of that hurt. It's not just painful, it's disorienting, because the ground shifts underneath you without warning. One moment you're inside the conversation responding to an invitation. The next moment you are somehow the problem. And then came the wall. 48 hours of silence. Not the ordinary quiet of two people moving through their days. The deliberate, pointed silence that says, I'm not available to you right now. And I'm not going to tell you when that changes. I sat with that. I sat with the injury and the confusion and the very real question of what I had actually done wrong, if anything. I sat with the frustration of being the one holding the hurt while he held the silence. And then I climbed over the wall. Not because I'd done something wrong that required repair. Not because the accusation had any merit. But because I made a conscious choice that the relationship mattered to me more than the one who was waiting to be approached. The connection was worth more than the position of the wronged party who holds the line and needs to be right. That choice is what this episode is about. Not the conflict, not the injury, the climb. Let me name what actually happened in that conversation, because I think it's more common than most people admit. My husband was not ready for a solution. He was not asking for a path through. He was sharing something painful, and what he needed in that moment was not my perspective on what could be done. He needed to feel that I was with him and that I heard him. And I gave him the wrong thing. Not from carelessness, from care. The specific kind of care that looks forward, that reaches for resolution, that cannot sit quietly inside a problem without trying to address it. He experienced that as pressure, as judgment, as evidence that I did not understand the complexity of what he was carrying. And from inside his nervous system, which was already under strain from this ongoing situation, my reaction looked like criticism. This is a misunderstanding, not a lie, not a character flaw on either side. Two people in the same conversation having two completely different experiences of what was happening. He heard, "You are not handling this right." I meant, "I see you struggling and I want to help you find a way through." Same words, two different worlds. This happens in intimate relationship more than anywhere else because the stakes are higher and the defenses are lower. The people we love most are the people we are most exposed to. And when that exposure meets a nervous system that is already stretched thin, even the most generous offer of help can feel like an intrusion. Understanding that does not make the accusation land any less sharply, but it begins to change the story of what the accusation actually was. I want to address the accusation directly because I think there is something important in it that goes beyond this one conversation. When someone who is overwhelmed and cornered reaches for a counterattack, they almost never reach for something neutral. They reach for the thing that will land, that will hurt, the thing that hits closest to home, the thing that reframes the dynamic so that suddenly they are not the one under pressure, you are. Being accused of checking out from something that I had been actively, consistently present for was not an honest assessment of my behavior. It was a nervous system in pain doing what nervous systems do in pain. Finding something to push against so that the pressure has somewhere else to go. I knew that, even in the moment. I knew it at some level, and knowing it did not stop it from hurting. This is something the practice does not protect me from. Seeing clearly does not make the wound disappear. It changes what you do with the wound, but the wound is still real. What clear seeing gave me in the aftermath was the ability to separate two things that can easily collapse into each other. What he said and what it meant. What he said was an accusation that was not true. What it meant was that he was in more pain than he had words for, and he reached for the nearest available deflection. That's not an excuse. That's a description. And holding those two things separately, the impact and the origin is exactly what capacity and conditioning actually looks like applied to someone you love in a moment that costs you something real. The silence that followed was its own kind of communication. 48 hours is a long time to sit with something unresolved. Long enough to replay the conversation in multiple directions, long enough to feel the full weight of the accusation and the injustice of it, long enough to construct and deconstruct the case for your own position until you know it by heart. I'm not going to tell you that I sat in those 48 hours in a state of serene acceptance. I did not. I sat in them with the full, uncomfortable mix of hurt and frustration, and the very human desire to be seen clearly by the person who was choosing not to look. But I also sat in them with something else, a question that kept surfacing underneath the noise. What is he carrying right now that made this moment so much bigger than it needed to be? Not as a way of excusing what happened, as an honest attempt to see the whole picture rather than just the part that was most painful to me. He has been managing something genuinely hard for a long time, something with no clean answer and no clear end. The kind of ongoing weight that does not announce itself every day, but lives in you constantly, shaping how much you have available for everything else. The weight was in the room with us. I hadn't fully accounted for it, and neither, perhaps, had he. That understanding did not close the wound, but it changed its meaning. And changing its meaning has changed what I was able to do next. I broke the silence. I want to be specific about what that means and what it does not mean. It does not mean I decided I was wrong. I was not wrong. It does not mean the accusation had merit. It did not. It does not mean I performed forgiveness I did not fully feel, or pretend the 48 hours had not happened. It means I made a choice. Conscious, deliberate, eyes open. The choice was this. I value this relationship more than I value the position of the person who waits to be approached. I'm willing to be the one who reaches first, even when reaching first is not what the situation calls for in terms of fairness. Because fairness is not the same as love. And love, at its most demanding, sometimes asks you to extend what was not extended to you. This is not weakness. I want to say that clearly. This is one of the most demanding things the practice ever asks. Because it requires you to hold two things simultaneously. The full truth of your own hurt and the full humanity of the person who caused it. Both at the same time, without using one to cancel out the other. He was doing his best based on what he had in that moment. His best included an accusation that was not fair and a silence that was not kind. And I was doing my best based on what I had. My best included climbing over a wall I did not build to reach someone who had not yet found their way back to me. This is conscious compassion in intimate relationship. Not soft, not easy, not the version that looks good on a journal page. The version that costs something real and asks you to pay it anyway. This week I want to offer you two questions to sit with, not to answer immediately, just to hold. The first one is for the moments when care lands as a threat. When you reach towards someone with genuine intention and find the door closing rather than opening. Ask yourself, what might they be carrying right now that is making my reaching feel like pressure rather than support? That question does not excuse the response. It does not ask you to absorb an injury without naming it. It just interrupts the story long enough to create some space between the impact and the verdict. The second question is harder. If you're currently sitting inside a silence, 48 hours or 48 days or 48 months, waiting for the other person to come to you because fairness says they should, what would it mean to climb over the wall anyway? Not because you were wrong, not because you owe something you do not owe, but because you have decided that what is on the other side matters more than the position you are holding on this side. That is a question worth sitting with honestly, without pressure and without guilt, just sitting with it and seeing what it tells you. Let me just say, I'm still in this marriage, and that matters to say, not because the moment I described was small. It was not small. But because what came after it, the conversation that became possible once the wall came down, was more honest than the one we would have had if I had waited for him to reach first. Climbing over the wall did not resolve everything, but it created the conditions for something real to happen. And something real is always worth more than being right about who should have moved first. Conscious compassion in intimate relationship does not ask you to be a saint. It does not ask you to have no needs or feel no hurt or perform a serenity you do not have. It asks you to hold the full truth of your own experience and the full humanity of the other person at the same time. And then, when you are ready, to choose connection over position. That is the whole practice right there. in one ordinary and completely extraordinary moment between two people who love each other. Next week, we look at something that lives underneath a lot of the moments we have been talking about this season. A pattern so familiar that most people have never stopped to question it. But once you see it, you will see it everywhere. Eyes open, compass steady. That's enough for today. If this opened something for you, stay close. You can subscribe, share it, or just sit with what stirred. Brave awareness isn't a destination, it's a return. I'll meet you there again soon.